He walked into the bakery to pay for a 6-tier wedding cake, ready to marry a woman he barely tolerated to secure his empire. But standing by the display case was the wife he buried 3 years ago, holding a little girl with his exact, unmistakable grey eyes. Gabriel Marino was not a man who ran errands. As the head of the Marino Syndicate, an organization that had controlled Chicago's underground ports and construction contracts for 3 generations, Gabriel's life was dictated by closed-door meetings, encrypted phones, and violence. He wore bespoke Tom Ford suits that hid the holster of his Glock 19, and his time was measured in millions of dollars, not minutes. Yet, on a freezing Tuesday afternoon in late November, the 34-year-old Mafia boss found himself stepping out of a bulletproof Mercedes G-Wagon on Oak Street. He was getting married in exactly 6 days. The wedding was a tactical nightmare, a forced merger masquerading as a holy sacrament. He was to marry Isabella Capello, the eldest daughter of the rival Capello family. It was an alliance forged in blood to stop a turf war that was bleeding both families dry. Gabriel didn't love Isabella. In fact, he found her vanity exhausting and her family treacherous. But in his world, you didn't marry for love. You married for survival. Isabella had insisted on one thing, a specific 6-tier spun sugar cake from Patisserie Laurent, an upscale, ridiculously expensive French bakery nestled among the designer boutiques of the Gold Coast. Her wedding planner had forgotten to make the final payment, and the bakery threatened to cancel the order. To keep the peace and silence Isabella's complaints, Gabriel told his driver to pull over. He told his 2 bodyguards, Tommy and Enzo, to wait by the car. It was a bakery. He didn't need muscle for a bakery. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful, high-pitched note as Gabriel stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of melting butter, vanilla bean and espresso, a stark, almost offensive contrast to the scent of stale cigarette smoke, expensive scotch, and copper blood that usually clung to Gabriel's world. He approached the counter, reaching into his coat for his black American Express card, his jaw tight with impatience. That was when he smelled it. Beneath the overwhelming aroma of the pastries, there was a faint, impossibly familiar scent. Jasmine and white sandalwood. Gabriel froze. His hand halted halfway into his coat. It was a custom perfume, blended specifically for one woman in a boutique in Florence, a woman who was dead. 3 years ago, Gabriel's life had been entirely different. He had been married to Evelyn Hayes, a civilian, a woman completely untouched by his dark world. She was a curator at the Art Institute of Chicago, a woman with warm laughter and an absolute refusal to be intimidated by his reputation. He had loved her with a terrifying, consuming ferocity. He had tried to shield her from the syndicate, to build a wall between his sins and her innocence. He failed. 3 years ago, Evelyn's car was blown to pieces on Lower Wacker Drive. The police, the fire department, and Gabriel's own fixers had combed through the charred wreckage. Dental records and fragments were identified. The police called it a tragic gas leak in the engine. Gabriel knew it was a hit. He had buried an empty, weighted casket on a rainy Thursday, and a piece of his soul died with her. In the years that followed, Gabriel became a monster, ruthless and cold, tearing through the city's underworld to find her killers, eventually leading to the stalemate with the Capellos that forced this current, miserable engagement. It's just a perfume, Gabriel told himself, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Someone else bought it. Stop losing your mind. But his instincts, the same instincts that kept him alive in gang wars, screamed at him to turn around. Slowly, Gabriel turned his head away from the counter and looked toward the small seating area, bathed in the afternoon sunlight. Standing by the macaron display, holding a pink pastry box, was a woman. She wore a heavy camel coat, her back to him. But Gabriel knew the slope of those shoulders. He knew the rich, dark, chestnut waves of hair that fell past her collar. His breath left his lungs in a sharp, agonizing rush. She turned slightly to hand the cashier a $20 bill. It was her. The soft curve of her jaw, the scattering of freckles across her nose, the green eyes that had haunted his nightmares for over 1,000 nights. Evelyn. She wasn't a ghost. She was breathing. She was here. Gabriel's vision narrowed. The bustling sounds of the bakery, the espresso machine hissing, the chatter of wealthy patrons, faded into a dull, echoing hum. He took a step forward, his expensive leather shoes silent on the checkered tile floor. The anger, the grief, the absolute shock warring in his chest felt like a physical heart attack. Opened his mouth to shout her name. Then opened his mouth to shout her name. Then a small voice broke through the silence in his mind. "Mommy, can I eat the pink one now?" Gabriel stopped dead in his tracks. Tugging at the hem of Evelyn's camel coat was a child, a little girl, no older than 2.5. She was bundled in a white knit sweater, holding a small stuffed rabbit. Gabriel's eyes dropped to the child. The little girl looked up, impatient for her pastry. She had dark, unruly curls, much like Evelyn's. But as the child tilted her head, catching the light streaming through the bakery window, Gabriel felt the floor drop out from underneath him. The girl's eyes weren't green like her mother's. They were a piercing, stormy, metallic grey. The exact same shade of grey that stared back at Gabriel in the mirror every morning. The infamous merino eyes. Gabriel did the math in a fraction of a second. 3 years since the explosion. A 2.5-year-old child. Evelyn hadn't just faked her death. She had stolen his child. Evelyn. The name tore from Gabriel's throat, a low, guttural sound that barely carried over the noise of the bakery, yet it cracked like a whip in the space between them. Evelyn froze. The pink pastry box slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. 2 macarons spilled out, shattering into sugary pink dust on the tiles. Slowly, she turned around. When her eyes met his, Gabriel saw something that shattered the remnants of his breaking heart. Absolute, unadulterated terror. She didn't look like a woman relieved to see her husband. She looked like a prey animal that had just been cornered by a wolf. "Gabriel," she whispered, the color draining completely from her face. She immediately stepped backward, instinctively pushing the little girl behind her legs, shielding her from him. That single motion, protecting their daughter from him, ignited a cold, calculating fury in Gabriel's blood. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. The few customers nearby gave them a wide berth, sensing the violent, invisible aura radiating from the man in the dark suit. "Don't make a scene," Gabriel murmured, his voice deadly soft. He grabbed Evelyn's elbow. His grip was tight enough to bruise, yet he was mindful not to pull too hard in front of the child. "Grab your purse. We are sitting down. Now." "Gabriel, please, I can explain. Let us go." Evelyn pleaded, her voice trembling, tears already welling in her eyes. "Mommy," the little girl whimpered, peeking out from behind Evelyn's coat, her stormy grey eyes wide with confusion. She looked at Gabriel, tilting her head. "Are you mad at Mommy?" Gabriel felt a physical pain in his chest, sharper than any bullet he had ever taken. He looked down at the tiny, perfect face. His daughter. He had a daughter. He forced his features to soften, though his jaw ticked dangerously. "No, Piccola," Gabriel said, his voice surprisingly steady. I'm an old friend of your mummy's. We just need to sit and catch up." He guided them to a secluded booth in the far corner of the bakery, out of direct sight from the street window. He sat on the outside edge of the booth, physically trapping Evelyn and the child against the wall. There was no escape. The little girl, blissfully unaware of the tectonic plates shifting beneath her parents' lives, picked up a napkin and began playing with her stuffed rabbit. "What is her name?" Gabriel demanded, keeping his voice to a harsh whisper. Evelyn was shaking. She clutched her purse to her chest like a shield. "Mia," she breathed. "Her name is Mia." "Mia," Gabriel repeated, the name tasting like ash and honey on his tongue. He leaned forward, his grey eyes locking onto Evelyn's green ones. "You let me mourn you. You let me bury an empty box. I destroyed half of this city looking for the people who put the bomb in your car. And you were here, living in the same city." "I was in Seattle," Evelyn whispered hurriedly, glancing nervously at the door. "I just moved back to Chicago 3 weeks ago. My aunt got sick. I needed to help her. I thought you were busy. I read in the papers that you were marrying Isabella Capello. I thought I was safe." "Safe from what?" Gabriel hissed, slamming his hand flat on the table. The coffee cups rattled. Mia jumped, looking up with wide eyes. Gabriel instantly regretted it, taking a deep breath to rein in the monster inside him. "Safe from what, Evelyn? From me? I loved you. I worshipped the ground you walked on." "You lied to me!" Evelyn fired back, her fear suddenly overshadowed by a fierce, protective anger. She kept her voice low, but the venom was unmistakable. "You told me you were going legitimate. You told me the blood was in the past. But I found the ledger. Gabriel! The night of the explosion!" Gabriel's blood ran cold. The ledger. The encrypted black book that held the names of every corrupt politician, every paid-off judge, and every hit sanctioned by the Marino family. "I went to your office to tell you I was pregnant," Evelyn continued, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You weren't there, but your safe was cracked open. Tommy had left it open. I looked inside, and I saw the documents, the wiretap transcripts." Gabriel's mind raced. 3 years ago, he had intercepted communications from the Capello family. They were planning a massive strike. But what did Evelyn see? "I read the transcripts, Gabriel," she choked out. "I saw the order from Carlo Capello. He ordered the hit on me. He explicitly stated that if I was out of the picture, you would be emotionally compromised, and the commission would force you to marry Isabella to merge the families." "I didn't know about that until it was too late," Gabriel swore, his heart pounding. "I didn't know they were targeting you." "That's a lie," Evelyn hissed, leaning in close. "Attached to that transcript was a memo, with your signature, a peace treaty with the Capellos, signed 2 days before my car blew up. You knew they wanted me dead to secure the alliance. And you signed the treaty anyway. You traded my life for power, Gabriel. You traded us." Gabriel sat frozen, the noise of the bakery completely vanishing. He hadn't signed a treaty. 2 days before the explosion, he had signed a logistical agreement for port shipping, handled by his underboss, a man named Silvio. Silvio, who had conveniently retired to Sicily 6 months after Evelyn's death, the pieces fell together with sickening clarity. Silvio was working with the Capellos. They forged Gabriel's signature to make it look like Gabriel signed off on a blind alliance, knowing Evelyn's death would be the catalyst to force the marriage. The Capellos didn't just kill his wife, they orchestrated a flawless coup to merge the families and eventually absorb Gabriel's empire through Isabella. And Evelyn had found the forged documents. She thought her husband, the man she loved, had sold her out to marry a Mafia princess. I paid a cleaner on the docks to switch my car that night, Evelyn whispered, pulling Gabriel back to the present. I watched it explode from 3 blocks away. I ran because I thought you wanted me dead, and I had to protect Mia. Gabriel stared at the woman he had mourned, the woman who had spent 3 years believing he was a monster who tried to have her assassinated. He looked at Mia, his daughter, who was busy feeding her stuffed rabbit a crumb of bread. He was supposed to marry Isabella Capello in 6 days. He was supposed to invite the men who tried to murder his wife and child into his home. Gabriel reached across the table. Evelyn flinched, but he bypassed her, gently resting his large, calloused hand over little Mia's tiny hand. The child looked up at him, offering a sweet, innocent smile that broke Gabriel's hardened soul into 1,000,000 pieces. He looked back at Evelyn. The cold, ruthless Mafia boss was gone. In his eyes was a terrifying, violent clarity. "I didn't sign that paper, Evie," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating octave. "They played us both, but I promise you to God they are going to pay." Suddenly, Gabriel's phone vibrated violently in his pocket. It was Tommy, his bodyguard outside. He answered it, keeping his eyes on his family. "Yeah." "Boss," Tommy's voice came through, tense and rushed. "We got a problem. 2 black SUVs just pulled up blocking the G-Wagon. It's the Capello brothers, Isabella's brothers. They're armed and they're walking toward the bakery. They know she's in there." Gabriel's grip tightened on the phone. The trap hadn't just been set 3 years ago. It was snapping shut right now. Gabriel's phone clicked shut. The luxury and warmth of Patisserie Laurent dissolved into a tactical battleground in his mind. Outside the frosted glass windows, 2 matte black Cadillac Escalades had boxed in his Mercedes. 4 men stepped out onto the snowy Oak Street pavement. At the front were Dante and Leo Capello, Isabella's ruthless older brothers. They hadn't followed Gabriel to check on a wedding cake. They had been tracking Evelyn. "Gabriel, what is it?" Evelyn's voice trembled, her maternal instincts flaring as she pulled Mia tightly onto her lap. The little girl, sensing the sudden shift in the air, dropped her stuffed rabbit and began to whimper. "The Capellos are outside," Gabriel said, his voice stripped of all emotion, cold and mechanical. He reached under his bespoke suit jacket, his hand wrapping around the grip of his Glock 19. "They tracked you. They know you're alive, and they know about Mia. If they get through those doors, none of us are leaving." Evelyn let out a choked sob, burying her face in Mia's curls. "I told you we weren't safe. I should have never come back to Chicago." "Look at me," Gabriel commanded, grabbing Evelyn's chin and forcing her to meet his storm-gray eyes. 3 years ago, I failed to protect you because I didn't see the knife in my back. Today, I see exactly who is holding the blade. I am not letting you die twice. Do you understand?" Evelyn gave a jerky, terrified nod. Gabriel stood, his towering frame shielding them from the front windows. He tapped his earpiece, connecting directly to his bodyguards outside. "Tommy, Enzo, weapons hot. Do not let Dante and Leo through that front door. I'm taking the girls out the back." "Copy that, boss," Tommy replied, the metallic click of a rifle chambering around, echoing through the earpiece. Gabriel hauled Evelyn to her feet, scooping little Mia into his left arm. The child buried her face in his neck, her tiny hands gripping his lapel. For a fraction of a second, the scent of baby powder and Evelyn's jasmine perfume hit him, reminding him of exactly what he was fighting for. "Stay behind me. We are going through the kitchen," Gabriel ordered. They moved fast. The bakery staff, noticing the giant armed man rushing past the counter, began to scream. Patrons ducked under marble tables. Crack, crack, crack. The deafening roar of automatic gunfire shattered the tranquility of Oak Street. The front windows of the bakery exploded inward in a hail of tempered glass and spun sugar. Screams erupted as Gabriel shoved Evelyn through the swinging aluminum doors of the kitchen, kicking them shut, just as a spray of bullets tore through the mahogany display case they had been standing near moments before. "Keep moving!" Gabriel barked at the terrified pastry chefs who were scrambling for the exits. He led Evelyn down a narrow hallway, smelling of yeast and bleach, kicking open the heavy steel service door that led to a snow-covered alleyway. The freezing Chicago wind howled, biting at their skin. A black Lincoln Navigator idled at the end of the alley. The back door swung open, and Enzo, Gabriel's second bodyguard, stepped out, an assault rifle in his hands. "Boss, over here! I brought the backup vehicle!" Enzo shouted over the wind. Relief washed over Evelyn's face, and she started to run toward the car, but Gabriel's combat-honed instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. The Capellos had pinned Tommy at the front. How did Enzo slip away so easily? And why was the Navigator parked in an alley it had no business knowing to cover? Gabriel grabbed Evelyn by the back of her camel coat, yanking her hard behind a steel dumpster. "Gabriel, what are you doing? The car is right there!" Evelyn cried. Gabriel didn't answer her. He raised his Glock, aiming it squarely at his own bodyguard. "Enzo, drop the rifle!" Enzo froze, his eyes widening. "Boss, it's me! Dante is coming through the kitchen. We have to go." Dante wouldn't know to sweep the kitchen unless someone told him the layout. Gabriel yelled back, his finger hovering over the trigger. "And Tommy's radio went dead 10 seconds ago. You sold me out, just like Silvio did 3 years ago." Enzo's expression morphed from panic to cold resignation. He slowly lowered the barrel of his rifle, aiming it directly at Evelyn. "Nothing personal, Marino. Carlo Capello pays better, and he wants the mother and the bastard child dead before the wedding." Before Enzo could pull the trigger, Gabriel fired twice. The loud pops echoed off the brick walls. Enzo dropped to the snow, clutching his chest. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He ushered Evelyn and Mia past the bleeding traitor, commandeering the Navigator. He threw Evelyn and his daughter into the back seat, sliding behind the wheel. Tires screaming against the icy asphalt, Gabriel smashed the SUV through a chain-link fence, disappearing into the labyrinth of Chicago's lower streets before Dante Capello could even reach the alley. 6 days later. The bells of Holy Name Cathedral rang out, a hollow, joyous sound that echoed across the Gold Coast. Inside, the cathedral was awash in white lilies and imported orchids. The pews were filled with the most dangerous men in North America, wearing tailored tuxedos and carrying concealed weapons. At the altar stood Isabella Capello, radiant in a $200,000 custom lace gown, a triumphant smile painted on her red lips. Beside her stood her father, Carlo Capello, looking like a king who had finally conquered his greatest rival. Gabriel Marino stood at the altar, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. He wore a midnight black tuxedo. He looked every bit the powerful, defeated Don surrendering his empire for peace. The priest raised his hands, preparing to begin the sacrament that would merge the Marino and Capello families forever. "Before we begin," Gabriel interrupted, his voice echoing through the vaulted stone ceilings. He didn't look at Isabella. He looked directly at Carlo Capello. "I have a wedding gift for my new father-in-law." Isabella's smile faltered. "Gabriel, what are you doing? The priest is speaking." The heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral swung open with a resounding thud. The entire congregation turned. Walking down the center aisle, flanked by heavily armed Marino loyalists, was Tommy. His face was bruised from the shootout 6 days prior, but his eyes were victorious. Dragged by the collar beside him was Silvio, Gabriel's former underboss, the man who had supposedly retired to Sicily. Silvio was battered, bleeding, and clutching a black leather ledger against his chest. Carlo Capello's face drained of color. Dante and Leo reached into their jackets, but 50 of Gabriel's men instantly stood up from the pews, their weapons drawn and leveled at the Capello family. "You thought I was burying my wife 3 years ago," Gabriel said, stepping down from the altar, ignoring Isabella's panicked gasps. "But you only buried an empty box. And last Tuesday, your sons tried to finish the job by cornering her in a bakery. Did you really think you could touch my family and live to see this merger, Carlo?" Murmurs of shock rippled through the neutral crime bosses in attendance. The commission had strictly forbidden targeting innocent spouses. It was the only rule that held their chaotic world together. Gabriel snatched the black ledger from Silvio's hands and threw it onto the marble floor at Carlo's feet. "Page 42, Gabriel said, his voice ringing with lethal authority. "Wire transfers, audio transcripts, proof that Carlo Capello paid Silvio to forge my signature on a peace treaty, plant a bomb in my wife's car, and stage this entire war just to force this marriage and steal my territory." The heads of the 5 families, seated in the front row, stared at Carlo with predatory disgust. By breaking the absolute rule, Carlo had just signed his own death warrant. "It's a lie!" Carlo bellowed, sweating profusely. "He's trying to back out of the deal. Kill him!" But nobody moved. The Capello men realized they were entirely surrounded. Gabriel stepped uncomfortably close to Carlo, leaning in so only the old man and his terrified daughter could hear him. "The commission will tear your empire apart. By midnight, your sons will be hunted down, and Isabella will be left with nothing. Consider this my annulment." Gabriel turned his back on the altar, walking down the aisle as the cathedral descended into screaming chaos and accusations. He pushed through the heavy oak doors, stepping out into the crisp, bright Chicago morning. A black G-Wagon was idling by the curb. The back window rolled down. Inside sat Evelyn, wearing a simple, elegant emerald sweater, her green eyes shining with a mixture of tears and overwhelming relief. Next to her, safely strapped into a car seat, was Mia, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Gabriel opened the door and slid in beside them. The heavy, suffocating darkness that had gripped his soul for 3 years finally shattered, replaced by the warmth of his daughter's tiny hand reaching out to grab his thumb. "Is it over?" Evelyn whispered, resting her head against his shoulder. Gabriel wrapped his arm around her, kissing the top of her dark hair. He looked out the window as Tommy got into the driver's seat, steering them toward O'Hare Airport, where a private jet was waiting to take them far away from the bloodstains of Chicago. "Yeah, Evie," Gabriel murmured, staring into the stormy grey eyes of his little girl. "It's finally over. We're going home." If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more pulse-pounding, dramatic storytelling. The world of the Mafia is full of secrets, but nothing is stronger than a family's survival. What do you think Gabriel should have done to the Capellos? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and share this video with a friend who loves a good plot twist.